three studies. You're going to use two tools in Illustrator called the symbol sprayer tool and the brush tool. And I'm going to give you a quick rundown on how to use those. To find these, if they're not in the toolbar over here, go to the ... and scroll up and down until you see symbol sprayer tool. And the symbol sprayer tool has several tools that go along with it. So I'm going to shift click on all of those, and then I'm going to move them over into the toolbar. And I'm not really sure what the best place is to put those, but I'll just try to drag them someplace. It looks like that was okay. So I dragged them by in a tab by themselves, so that's okay. The next thing I'm looking for is the brush tool, which probably is already in here someplace, like probably, yeah, there's the paintbrush tool, which really any tool will do that will draw a path. So the pencil tool, the brush tool, even the pen tool, as long as you can make a path, you can use the brush tool. Because both of these things, the symbol sprayer and the brushes, are actually in the palettes over here. If you don't see them over in your palettes over here, you can go up to Window, and you can find them there. There's brushes and there's symbols. So you need those two associated palettes in order to use these. If I bring up brushes, I can pull that off, and if I click on symbols, I can pull that off, just so they're ready, and I can show you how to use those. Both of these work in the same way, in that you you take your symbol, the thing that you've drawn, like this, and you drag them over into either one of these or both, as is the case here. And this enables you to use them with these other tools over here. So if I'm going to first talk about the symbol sprayer. So I will drag this feather that I have here over into the symbols palette and just let it drop. When you do that, you get this dialog box. You can give it a name if you want. There's not really much else that's too important here, so you don't really need to change anything, but you do need to drag it over there and just say OK. And you can see that it pops up in the little menu there. So now that I've done that, I can actually delete this one, but I'm going to put it aside because later I'm going to drag it over into the brushes palette also. So I think I'll just lay that up there, and I'm going to take this type that I put here and move it out of the way. And then I'm going to use this 8x8 format in order to use the sprayer tool. So there's the sprayer tool right there, and I'm going to click on it and make sure that I have the tool itself instead of one of these helper tools and or modifier tools. And you can see that I get a circle here, and that's the brush size, and you can change that with the bracket keys on the keyboard. You can make it bigger, you can make it smaller. It doesn't change the size of the symbol, but it does change the number that gets sprayed down all at once and the area that it sprays to. So anyway, the cool thing about this is you can just start spraying, and the longer you hold down your mouse, the more of these that get sprayed in there. So that's pretty much the way it works. All of these are, you can resize them as a group. but they kind of are stuck in this group thing. So you can break them out of there, but for right now, we want them contained in this group. So because we're going to use these other associated tools to modify them. So I'm going to show you how to do that next. So there's the first one called the shifter, and you can see that this shifter has little arrows on it. And what that means is I can actually, start clicking and dragging to shift these one way or another. You can kind of see they're moving around here. Okay, so that's the shifter. If I go to the next one, it's the scruncher. And the scruncher pretty much just sort of draws everything to it. So, you can make them more compact and more condensed. And then, let's see, if you hold down the Option key on most of these tools, it will do the opposite. So, whereas if I don't hold down the Option, everything kind of converges together. If I do hold down Option, they get farther apart. Okay, so the next one is the sizer tool. And this is the one that we're mostly going to concentrate on for the first set of studies. And that is just what it says. If you click on these things, they'll get bigger. But if you hold down the Option key, they'll get smaller. So the first set that I'm going to ask you guys to do is a contrast in size. So I want you to make a composition using the symbol sprayer and also using the sizer tool to create a piece that's about the contrast in size. So we'll talk more about that as I go along. But anyway, that's the sizer tool related to the sprayer tool. And the next thing is the spinner. So it basically allows you to orient these in different directions and things like that. So the nice thing about this is you can kind of start to get a lot of motion. You can kind of head all these in a direction if you want, kind of like they're going towards something. So, you can make some very interesting compositions with that. Okay, so there are some other ones under here which I would typically ask you to do studies with, but since we're short on time, I'm not gonna get into one I would have had you do is a gradation of value, and the screener tool comes in handy for that because the more you click, the lighter things get. So you could actually play with value and things like that. And I guess for this study on contrast of size, you could still use value if you wanted to. One thing you can also do with this stuff is make a copy of it, and then when you're thinking about doing your composition, you could move these around. So you could use the shifter, and even though you can kind of create kind of layered these in to make them more interesting. So you don't have exactly the same thing. You could stretch these out a little bit or resize the whole thing. If you wanted just an area that was more compact or just adding richness to your composition. So whereas before you were kind of making regular patterns and things, this one you really start to be able to manipulate and make some um, interesting compositions with it, hopefully. So, you can layer as much of the stuff as you want to on top of each other, and hopefully come up with a cool composition. Now, since this is contrast of size, I think, you really want to push the difference between sizes if you can. So I'm going to get the sizer here, and I'm going to, I don't have anything selected. That's why it gave me that message. So make sure I have a section, one of these compartments or boxes with these symbols in it selected. And then I'm going to size some of this stuff way up. And remember, these are compositions, so basically anything outside of the white box is not going to print. So when I have something this big, it really kind of becomes a window rather than a box that everything is safely stuck inside of, which makes it a more interesting composition. Okay, so that basically might be an interesting composition. When you're using your own symbols, I'm sure it will be a lot different. One thing you could do is maybe have some kind of confrontation going on. That might be actually the next study. This one is about contrast of size, but you could also, oops, that's not what I meant to do. You could also have these guys kind of coming after each other. Or something, I don't know. They kind of take on a life of their own when you use start to use these tools. And anyway, you can go back and forth, get different tools, if you need to add or hold down Option to make things smaller, if you want to make them seem like they're receding into the distance, or if you want them to come forward. You can just go back and forth. So contrast and size is going to be one set of your studies. Okay, I'm going to make a new composition. First, before I do that, I'm going to copy this guy here. I'm going to make a new composition, Command N on the keyboard. And then it's 8 by 8, so I'm going to say create. And I'm going to go look at the brush tool. So I'm going to paste this in. Now the brush tool is basically you can take any shape, any symbol, and you can turn it into a brush. So the reason I wanted you to do one of your symbols that was more elongated is because that lends itself to being a brush more than if it weren't elongated. So I'll flip that around like that and kind of orient it like that. Okay, so just like I dragged the other symbol into the symbols box, I'm going to drag this one into the brushes palette. So I'm going to drag this over, and it's asking me a question. It says, do I want to make a scatter brush? Which is close to sort of what we were doing with the sprayer in a way, but I don't want a scatter brush right now. I want an art brush. So I'm going to click on art brush, say OK, and it's going to ask me how I want to, scale it, how I want it oriented like this or some other way. I could, orient it in different ways, but really this is how I want it oriented. I sort of set it up that way because I this is going to happen. And you can either scale it proportionally. So if you paint a long line, it'll make the feather bigger. If you make a short line, it'll make it really small. Or you can leave that unchecked, and if you paint a long line, it'll make a long skinny feather, and if I paint a short one, it'll make a short squat feather. So I'm going to leave it unchecked. I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to get the brush tool. I'm going to click on that in the palette. Oops, it applied it to that symbol there, so I'm going to delete that. But anyway, I'm going to select this, select the brush tool, and I'm just going to paint little feathers. Okay, so you can kind of see the effect of that. Now you can do a lot of interesting design with this. The fact that you can paint these, you can paint long, skinny, crazy stuff if you want, and it's all going to look different, depending on what your symbol looked like. So anyway, you kind of get the idea there. So I'm going to delete all these. So for the second set of studies, I would like you to maybe use this tool. You could use the symbol sprayer for it too. But I'd like you to create compositions about confrontation. So I guess the easiest way to do that would be, one thing about the brush tool, I'm using this as a brush. If I paint that way, it goes this way. If I paint that way, it goes the other way. So I'm going to undo both of those. So if I were doing something about confrontation, I might have like two sets of these coming after each other in some way or another. Maybe you just want to like brush in a whole series of them. Now this, like I said, it might be better. You might want to do this with the symbol sprayer instead of this tool, but this one might work okay too, depending on what your symbol looks like. So you're kind of going to set up a visual war of sorts. And you can fill these things up really densely. So the white space starts to become interesting, as well as the positive space. So, you got these kind of interesting gaps that kind of look like something or another. You might even want to use both of these tools, the brush tool and the symbol sprayer, in order to get these compositions made. So they're not really difficult tools to use, but if you don't kind of know how to use them, they can be a little bit difficult. So if you wanted to edit this, one of these, you can always change the shape of the curve by getting the direct selection cursor, and you can just alter the points, because it's still just a mark, a path that you made. And like I said, any path will do what you want it to do. I mean, we'll give you any tool that makes a path, like a pencil tool or the pen tool, can be used for this. Okay, so you want to make a set that's about confrontation. I don't think I've done a great job here, and I might need to go delete some of these, or just edit where they're placed, so I can move them around. I could rotate these. They're just individual brush strokes, really. But if you want to edit them other than just moving around or changing the shape of the stroke, you have to select one of them and then go to this button here on the bottom of the palette, and you could, change like how skinny they are, how thick they are. You could also flip them, one way or the other. And there are some other options there too. If you're using a tablet, you can even make them kind of pressure sensitive, things like that. Okay, I'm going to cancel that. So anyway, you get the idea of how to use that, and just try to make as interesting of composition as possible. Okay, well that's about it for showing you how to use those two tools. There are, of course, other things you can do, but see what you can get done with just those two tools. And I will be posting the assignment for these three. The third one is going to be more abstract. And by that, I mean, well, like confrontation, this one is kind of an abstract concept. And the other one, contrast and size, is not really an abstract. It's more of a formal description of what I'm asking you to do. But the third one is also sort of an abstract artistic interpretation, and it's just going to be called the wave. So you just have to, use either of these two tools, one, the other, or both, and come up with a set of studies based on the idea of the wave. And you can interpret that however you want. That's part of the fun. It's just to see what you come up with. So there it is.